With Star Trek Discovery just around the corner, it's important to focus on what Star Trek is all about and what Discovery looks set to focus on: the human adventure. Whilst yes, the cast includes a wide range of alien exotic characters, the primary focus has always been on the evolution of mankind as it becomes more and more inclusive of other races and alien cultures. Something that today you wouldn't think possible, as our leaders talk about isolationism and segregation with code words such as sovereignty and unity. Let's just say the human condition has issues. Lots of issues. And to ignore these aspects of humanity would be a crime. Exploration of the unknown comes at a huge price. It's a tremendous risk. Loss is a part of the game. Misunderstanding and even the risk of becoming stir crazy after a 5-year mission in space can actually be a major issue. Yes, folks, you really don't have to be crazy to work in space. But it sure can help. Well, Vance Major is prolific, that's for sure. His Minard films can be short, running time on his average on 3 to 4 minutes, with a few 15 minutes and 20-minute films here and there, but their look into the human psyche can be pretty close to the nail, especially when it comes to Star Trek. His fan films have a habit of getting to the point rather than giving us filler, and many can be left open to interpretation, whereas some really cut to the point like a sharp knife. Lieutenant Eric Minard is a complex character, to say the least. Not exactly a run-of-the-mill Star Trek character who is set at one point in the timeline. He is more of an interpretation on Star Trek than an actual physical character in its extended universe. His uniforms over the series, for want of a better word, have shifted from the TOS to the TNG era, with at least one foray into the mirror universe, suggesting that these fan films are more an existential view of the Star Trek universe as an experience rather than a canonical device on which to create a story. The adventure is more focused on personal experience than a ship-wide encounter. For example, the episode simply known as Minard follows the developing relationship between Lieutenant Minard and a female bridge officer, offering hope and happiness on an otherwise long and laborious mission into the unknown, only to be marred by tragedy as a result of that mission into the unknown. For those of you wanting Star Trek to be all utopia and light and think Discovery is going to be too dark and depressing, the Minard episode, as well as the shorts themselves, will be a good reminder that the unknown can be exactly that. It is fraught with rewards and experiences beyond anything we can imagine, and yet the risks involved are just as great. As Q once reminded us when the TNG crew first encountered the Borg, there are things out there we just aren't ready for. And this is just as true on the human level as well. Losing a loved one is something we can never prepare for, no matter how well trained. Take, for example, the Orville. Did you know there are people that are angry about Ed Mercer being upset about his wife cheating on him? We should be more evolved by then, they say. To what? To let go of certain traditions and values that ultimately make us human? Oh, sure, polyamory is a thing, but that doesn't mean that it's a future that every human will strive for. Some human traits such as monogamy and nuclear family are very difficult for humans to let go of. Also, the level of stress this long job can cause can also be problematic. The Mind's Eye, for example, has very little to do with it than a security officer getting phantasms of his crewmates whispering in his ear as the captain talks about his relationship. Yes, the sound is a bit off-putting, but I dare you not to move away from that 3-minute short without some dread. You seriously question if there's actually something on the planet influencing him, or if the security officer is seriously that paranoid. And some tremendous camera work at the end only works to heighten that sense of paranoia. And speaking of paranoia, the best collection is what I dubbed the Minard Saga is Pen Pals 1 and 2. The entire films are set from the point of view of the communications officer's panel as she sends a message to Lieutenant Minard about her job on the Melbourne, a ship that isn't even on Starfleet records. The people on that ship apparently have real issues. You have no idea what's going to happen after the captain approaches her, but the fact that there's no continuation after part 2 certainly leaves a compelling sense of unease. What happened to the Melbourne? And what did she mean by issues? And why is the captain so upfront and aggressive? It's only a minute of filming, but damn, it puts you into a claustrophobic and tense frame of mind. But I'll give you a hint. The answer is in another short fan film called Stormfront. Check the link below. If anything, the Minard Saga proves what can be done with limited resources, time, money, and the current guidelines. Sure, the sound isn't the greatest, oft-times muffled when outside, which can be annoying, but these aren't meant to be big-budget adventures. They're meant to be a fan film glimpse into the Star Trek human experience. There's not a lot of alien encounters in this saga, or at least none that are so blatant. Like in The Mind's Eye, for example, you don't know if it's an alien influence or just plain mental illness. And I think that's the point. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. And you never know if or when they'll ever come back to haunt you. Now, you might think that a 15-minute limitation is a push, but the creator of the Minard Saga proves otherwise. His storytelling can be both to the point without the filler to make up the time, and as subtle as a knife at the same time. Star Trek so easily becomes more of a psychological thriller than a sci-fi in these settings, and it works, certainly showing that Star Trek is a show capable of expressing many genres if put in the right hands. The sound effects may be disappointing to look at the end, and the special effects may not be the greatest. The scenery may obviously look like it's made out of wood rather than fake plastic and metal, but it's not these elements that make up the story. If anything, they actually help tell the story. If the writer and director is clever enough, they can overcome these drawbacks well enough to keep your attention undivided. And given the short length of these cleverly crafted vignettes, that's a trick he very well pulled off. I believe the point of the series itself is to show that limitation is in itself an artist's tool. It's not what you have, but what you can make out of what little you do have. Minard is made on a budget of next to nothing, in spare time and with fans who just want to contribute to the Star Trek experience. Sure, if you have the time and money, you can make a Star Trek masterpiece like Star Trek Horizons or Star Trek Continues, or push ambitions like Star Trek Axanar, but why would you need to? If your story is good enough, and if you can convey the atmosphere well enough, and you can build a bridge in your garage, you still have 15 minutes to half an hour of fun. Or even if many of the Eric Minard films, your 2 minutes or 3 minutes of fun. The short films are but an example of the Minard experience. The Valhalla Stone stands at 50 minutes, albeit with flashbacks to small scenes from other Minard films. Stormfront, a Melbourne production, also includes an appearance from Lieutenant Minard himself. I'm not saying that the acting is great. It's certainly no Star Trek, no Star Trek Horizon, and certainly no Axanar, but I think that's probably most of the charm. Sometimes it's good just to sit back and watch how fans themselves appreciate a show with their simple budgets and abilities, rather than an attempt at what could possibly pass as a fully independent and professional production. And at the end of the day, when it comes to fan films, I want heart over eye candy. And with that, the Minard Saga delivers in spades. I've included the playlist in the info bar below, and if you want to give this saga a try, I heartily recommend it to you, if only for a unique experience of storytelling that's at its best, despite its budgetary limitations. It's quite entertaining. Here we see a true fan in the Starfleet uniform, and it's enjoyable if not oft-times unnerving to behold. And from the looks of it, Vance Major doesn't seem to look like he's going to slow down in his fan film making. Last week alone, he released a fan film damn near every day. Now that's dedication. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more. Ever since the guidelines were announced, some people have been pretty quick to announce the death of the Star Trek fan film. And some have been pretty eager to encourage it, for personal advancement, sadly. Axanar being the prime example. The token wounded soldier telling us that it stood for the Star Trek fan film and fought hard for us, whilst having us look in the direction of CBS and Paramount, and shooting itself in the foot when we weren't looking. It's easy to point the finger of blame at the big boys, publicly attack CBS and Paramount for being bullies, when in reality all they were doing was protecting their intellectual property. To be honest with you, they actually saw no need to act on fan films before Axanar, and yet with the strides Axanar was making with money in its crowdfunding, and the announcement that it was no longer a fan film but a fully independent professional Star Trek movie with salaries and professional actors to justify it, exactly what was CBS and Paramount supposed to do? There were many claims that Axanar was working with CBS and Paramount despite the fact that the same studios claimed otherwise. When pushed into a corner and your IP is under threat from someone who doesn't own it, quite clearly doesn't respect it, and refuses to stop claiming he can get away with it, what do? Ignore it? Allow Axanar to profit from a copyright it doesn't even own? Then what? The precedent is made. If they didn't go after Axanar after many polite cease and desists, the case to stop the next professional independent Star Trek film would have been harder to make. You see, when you cross that line into infringement, the big boys have to act. And they have to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's clear from the attitude the Axanar team, and to an extent Fan Film Factor, a site that claims to work for Star Trek fan films, has nurtured towards CBS and Paramount, has had a detrimental effect. It utterly amazes me that Fan Film Factor sticks with this attitude, knowing full well that the more CBS and Paramount see the vitriol and hate coming their way from that community, they really don't see much of a need to loosen up their already more than generous guidelines. Clearly, fans of Axanar and the Fan Film Factor really don't get the point or why the lawsuits and the guidelines were made in the first place. What possible incentive do CBS and Paramount have to change their stance if there's no willingness to consider their stance in any other way than they were scared of Axanar and wanted to bully it to make an example? Ironically, even the Fan Film Forum, the Factor's official Facebook discussion group, acknowledges this. Shame no one gave Jonathan Lane, Fan Film Factor's editor, that memo, as he still keeps using that mouthpiece against CBS and Paramount to this day. So, as you can imagine, there's not much motive to make any changes to the guidelines then, I think you'll agree. And sadly, that may be what Alec Peters and Jonathan Lane may be going for. A disenfranchised fan base to bully CBS and Paramount to work in their favour. The fact that the Axanar team run an Orville fan group that encourages attacks on Star Trek Discovery might actually be a coincidence. I don't know. You tell me. I sincerely hope this is the case, but considering their current path hasn't resulted in any progress towards the change they claim to seek, I fail to see what they hope to gain from repeating the same mantra again and again and again, other than a rankled fan base. But as neither of them seem willing to discuss their stance outside of their own little circle and just pay lip service to it whilst they're all in their own sycophancy with each other, I guess we'll never know the answer to that, will we? The very reason fan films like Star Trek Continues work and Axanar didn't is largely because Star Trek Continues has continued to work with CBS and not crossed the lines that Axanar did. And I dare say it's been more in line with the spirit of Star Trek than Alec's vanity project. That Alec Peters and Jonathan Lane attacked the crew of Star Trek Continues constantly for not being sued shows how little Alec understands why he got into this mess in the first place. Or more than likely he does get it, and in reality he just wants to spoil it for the rest of us. If he can't get his film done on his terms, he'll make sure that no one else will either. Kind of funny then that an actual Axanar film is being made with no outside funding or crowdfunding, and well within the guidelines, and more importantly, without Alex Peters. And apparently in less time than the 2 years Alec Peters just announced his Axanar film will be made. If this non-Alec Peters related Axanar film is made in time, and within budget before Alec's dream film, what excuse will he have then? Or will he just use his horde of sycophants to bash that attempt too? Spike can make some very interesting monsters. If anything, the Minard Saga proves that the guidelines cannot and should not be a limiting factor on creativity. Fan films are more than just a film to watch. They are a dedication to a genre, a fandom, a medium that fans wish and want to contribute to. And they come in all forms of quality and quantity. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Ghostbusters, Harry Potter, and a countless number of other fan films on YouTube and around the internet prove that no matter what, fans will always find a way to bring their stories to the public, either through fan fiction or fan films. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to fit into canon. It's not the interpretation that counts. It's the heart and love of the show, books, or even genre they seek to emulate. And even as we wind down the Star Trek element of Fan Film Friday, it doesn't mean that I will not be returning to the Star Trek fan film in the near future. Star Trek has 51 years behind its belt, and fan films didn't begin or end with Axanar. Axanar was actually the result of many years of fan film productions, and as much as it wants to believe it was the pinnacle of fan film productions, I can assure you that the varying level of quality and quantity I have seen in this particular medium, Axanar is not that great, and has some pretty tough competitions in its wings. Don't let Axanar be the end of your dream film. Star Trek or otherwise, the Star Wars guidelines are even tougher. 5 minutes alone. But damn, there are still some quality feature-length fan films that are still being made celebrating the Star Wars saga. I'm not saying ignore the guidelines, because at the end of the day, that's all they are. But be creative. Hell, Orville is a homage to Star Trek. It's 48 minutes an episode. Let that sink in for a moment. Be inspired. Until next time, ciao.